Hot Springs Village Inside Out is a closer look at the greatness of Hot Springs Village, Arkansas and the surrounding areas. People, places, experiences. Hot Springs Village is one of the most beautiful places on earth. Join me, Randy Cantrell, and my co-host Dennis Simpson as we engage in weekly conversations to explore Hot Springs Village Inside Out. Today's show is brought to you by Central Arkansas's favorite radio station, KVRE. Find them on the dial at 92.9 FM. Stream them live at kvre.com. RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village. The award-winning RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village is the largest real estate office inside the village with over 30 full-time agents and support staff. Visit them to learn more about this beautiful place to solve your real estate needs. Call them today at 1-800-364-9007. Find them online at explorehsv.com. They are RE/MAX of Hot Springs Village at 1-800-364-9007 or online at explorehsv.com. Ike Eisenhower State Farm. Ike and his award-winning team have been serving the insurance needs of folks all around Hot Springs Village since 1998. Ike is qualified for State Farm's President's Club, Chairman's Circle, and Hot Springs Village Insurance Agent of the Year. Call Ike Eisenhower State Farm today at 501-984-4100. That's 501-984-4100. Find them online at ikeeisenhower.net. Call them today for all your insurance needs because, like a good neighbor, Ike Eisenhower State Farm is there.
This is a thinly veiled episode, and I mean very thinly veiled, because the bottom line is that we do shows about Hot Springs Village Inside Out. Today, Mr. Tim Ernst with us, and this is very thinly veiled because I've wanted to interview this guy for a decade or more. Tim, great to have you today, buddy.
Well, it's great to be here and down there. Appreciate it.
Well, we were just joking before I hit the button. I was introducing how I had become acquainted with you, or your work, I should say. And I would go into Wordsworth books up in the Heights and literally for the last 30 years, walk in and there's the Tim Ernst wall. And I'm like, wow. And Tim, you were saying there's like every book ever made. And what was your comment?
Well, I'd rather see the walls blank because that means that, people are buying them. But no, I'm just kidding about that. Usually my book's back in the corner where the dartboard is also. Hopefully they get more attention that way.
Tim, I can only I can't even know where to begin with this, but Tim, 4 decades, Tim, is that roughly, or longer?
Or longer, yes.
Yeah. I would call him the premier wildlife and nature photographer in the state by far and away. How many books, Tim? How many books have you published?
Well, I've got 20 coffee table picture books that I've done, and we've got 10 or 12 others that are guidebooks, waterfall guidebooks, hiking trail guidebooks, stuff like that.
Yeah, I'm going to really try not to nerd out here too, because between the hiking trail books and the photography books, man, anyway, again, thank you. How do you get started in, let's call it rural Northwest Arkansas or North Central Arkansas? How did you start? I really don't know the story at all.
Well, I started when I was a sophomore at the University of Arkansas in Fayetteville, and I didn't even really own a camera at the time. I was an environmental science major, and I was a terrible student. I was one of the worst high school and college students. I just wasn't. I was lazy, basically.
I was going to say inattentive, or just, yeah.
Yeah, and although history in high school was my most favorite class because back in one of the corners, it was very dark and I could go in there and for 45 minutes lay down and sleep and nobody would bother me. But no, I think it was in the spring of my sophomore year at the U of A in 1974, I answered a newspaper ad in the Arkansas Traveler newspaper that said guaranteed profits taking pictures of beautiful women. So
are they still hiring for this? Because I
was still a teenager, so how could I pass that up? Even though I was petrified of girls. I've always been very shy. Although I had spent the previous summer working for the Forest Service right out of high school, as a cave guide, Blanchard Springs Caverns. And
Oh,
all you
wow.
do all day is talk to people and be around people, which was kind of exactly the opposite of, I grew up out in the woods hunting and fishing by myself mostly. At any rate, I answered the ad, and the very next day I became a professional photographer overnight.
That's all it took?
That's all it took. And there's a lot of details there, but for the next 5 years, those were my wildlife photographer years. And a lot of people introduced me as a wildlife photographer. And that's true, because those 5 years, basically all I did was photograph sorority and fraternity parties. There were a lot of wild, it was a lot of fun. But
so let me get this straight. So it was wildlife, but not necessarily outdoors.
No, it was indoor wildlife.
Indoor wildlife.
That's right, yeah. But
so you grew up, where were you born in Arkansas? In Fayetteville.
Yeah, I was born in Fayetteville and lived there till in my 40s, I guess.
Back before there were 250,000 people in that area and more.
Exactly. That's right.
Yeah. You've seen a lot of changes there, huh?
You bet. Yeah. A lot of them for the good. Some of them, growing pains. But...
Yeah. Yeah. I don't even know where to begin. Let me hop ahead a little, and then I want to come back if that's okay. I see that we're in your gallery, I'm assuming today, right? And this is a gallery where you're located?
Well, we have a gallery in Newton County, just outside of Jasper, and I call it, we're about halfway between the Jasper and Ponca, Buffalo River, and I call it the Greater Low Gap Mount Sherman Metroplex up here.
I was going to ask if it was the Metroplex. It encompasses the whole suburban area or urban area of maybe 5,000 people if you put 3 towns together.
Yeah, I think the Jasper population is less than 500, as is the school from K through high school. Yeah.
I love when people say they're in Newton County, because I'm like, I know I know where that is, simply because it's Jasper and all outlying areas, and that's right. About how it is, right? Well, for our guest, and we have a lot of people that are going to be watching and listening today, and I really want to share a lot of these photos. Those of you that are just listening on the podcast, you're going to want to go to our YouTube channel, see Tim's shows, see Tim, see the man, and define the Ponca Jasper area, because there's something amazing at Ponca, in my opinion.
Well, there's a lot of things amazing at Ponca and Newton County. And of course, the biggest star is the Buffalo National River, America's first national river. Gets its headwaters is upstream from Ponca. We used to live my wife Pam and I and our daughter Amber used to live in a log cabin in the headwaters of the Buffalo River area for about 20 years. So it was like a 30-minute drive to get downstream to Ponca. And of course, there's a lot of hiking trails in Ponca, in the upper Buffalo River area and the Buffalo National River in general. Early on, the Buffalo River was basically just floating. It was a floating stream back in the 60s, and then 1972, it became a national river, and they started to develop hiking trails and other things. And one of the great tourist attractions here are Rocky Mountain elk that were transplanted into Boxley Valley, and elk and waterfalls, and the hiking trails, I think, are most of the year the 3 biggest draws here, because you can hike all year long, and that's one of the great things about Arkansas in general. But this area in the Ozarks and the Ouachitas, of course, is we have a lot of hiking trails that are not snow covered in the wintertime, like the Rocky Mountains or the Appalachians. People from out of state come here to hike a lot. This time of year, in fact, is a great time to get out and hike. There's very few snakes and bugs and not many people.
Chiggers are down too.
Chiggers are down too. That's right.
I remember in my 8th grade Arkansas history class, we have they had, when I was a kid, we had a year of mandatory education about Arkansas. And I remember that the settlers that moved to Arkansas were euphoric, the European settlers. And they would message and send letters back home that said, we can get 2 crops a year. And that was just beyond. And, having always grown up in Arkansas myself, I grew up in Benton Bryant. And I always remembered thinking, well, so not everybody gets 2 crops a year, right? And your point being, we just left the Gatlinburg Smokies, and they were getting ready for snow. and it's beautiful. It's absolutely beautiful. You can't eat the scenery, as they say, but it is a year-round environment that we have here in Arkansas. Tim, let's hop into some photos here in a minute, and let's come back. I see some beautiful stuff on your wall, and I never get is it Hogsbill Crag? What I never
Hawksbill.
Hawksbill.
Dr. Neil Compton, who of course led the fight to save the Buffalo River, he said it first described it as looking kind of like the bill of a hawk. That's very appropriate because there's a lot of hawks soar around there, but it's also known as what's considered the Forest Service name, which is Whitaker Point. And Whitaker Creek flows not directly underneath it, but through the drainage that you kind of overlook there. So
yeah,
and it as Hawksbill Craig, or the Craig is just because Whitaker is a much longer word to type. So I just say the Craig.
And in Arkansas, we want to, kind of shorten it up for us. I think one of the things that we need to cover that for our outside guests, because we'll have people from Sweden, Australia, around the world watching and listening, that we need to kind of tie in a national river because we were getting ready to dam it was the discussion, right?
Correct. Well, it was it has been on the schedule to have not one but multiple hydroelectric dams, I guess, flood control dams. That was particularly back in the 40s and 50s when there were a lot of lakes created for flood control and then for hydroelectric power production. And there were, I think, originally 3 dams being drawn up for the Buffalo River, and eventually it got down to 1. And then in the 60s, it was kind of frowned upon by more and more people that, we really like it the way it is. And it took a 10-year battle from the Ozark Society and other groups and a lot of individuals led by Dr. Neil Compton to save the Buffalo River, basically, is what they did. And there are a lot of different National Park Service properties in the United States. There's like 500 or 600 units of the National Park Service, but only a handful, less than 100, that are actually national parks, like Yellowstone and Hot Springs, of course. And they didn't create it as a national park. So they thought, well, let's make it the first national river, because that really is, that's the main star, is the river from end to end with no dams. And it's one of the longest free-flowing undammed streams in the United States.
I didn't know that. I will say, and for our guest, again, I do want to make note, I truly appreciate the documentaries that we see, and why am I blank on the documentarian who did the Civil War and all these things? PBS documentarian, you are blank too. It'll come to me in a second. But when he did the article, he did a great show about Yellowstone, and he called it the first national park. And I'm like, no, not exactly, because Hot Springs Reserve,
right,
Hot Springs National Reserve was the very first reserve or whatever. And then we changed the name to parks. Well, it's a semantic deal, but we were a little older than Yellowstone. But still, I think, and this is just my present world perception of our generation, and I think this was a time when previously we believed that nature had to be wrestled to the ground and conquered. I mean, do you know what I'm saying?
Oh yeah.
I've seen the photos. I've taken the tour of the Blakely Mountain Dam here at Lake Ouachita. Fantastic achievement. Engineering wise, it's remarkable. And we're probably using some of its electricity right now. I love that. That's fine. There need to be some natural places, right? Untouched.
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, we need a good balance. And, that's a constant struggle to be, and kind of between the Forest Service and the National Park Service. The National Park Service is more about preservation, and the National Forest Service is more about using our national resources, which is exactly what they do, and renewable resources. And then, of course, there are a lot of other agencies too. But yeah, it's great to have lakes. I mean, especially Hot Springs knows that better than anybody else, and up here in Northwest Arkansas as well. But it's also great to have free-flowing rivers every now and then, and it's great for the economy. It's great for just a lot of things here. Not only the people of Arkansas, but it is a national river. So they.
And if you don't believe that, pull up to Ponca, to any of the inlets at the Buffalo River during the summer and read the license plates. It's a who's who from around the world. It really is. Oh, Tim, I'm so excited. If you could do you have some photos you can share with us?
I can, if I need to be able to share my screen.
Sure. I think I've got that turned on. Yeah, I believe I do. I'm going to turn it on multiple just so there's no questions. And I'm apologizing in advance. I'm going to nerd out on some of this, and I'm going to ask f-stop and the saturation and what you do and how you do it and all that, if you don't mind.
Oh, sure. You can ask me anything you want, and if I don't know the answer, I'll make something up.
I'm good with that too. Okay, we've got your Zoom screen. So if you've got photos there, we're ready to go.
Yep, there we go. Okay.
Excuse me.
Well, there's a couple things that I want to do. One thing I want to do is kind of take you through my webpage, which gets you to a lot of pictures.
Well, let me get there first. Tim Ernst, ERNST, right?
Correct.
.com, timernst.com. And I promise you, if you type in Tim Ernst, you will find Tim Ernst. You're all over the place, buddy. Go ahead, please.
Now there's also a body guy, a bodybuilder guy named Tim Ernst that has a lot of books.
I saw that guy, and he's all Mr. Atlas kind of thing. Right.
That is not me.
For a moment, I thought that was you, Tim. I saw that, and I thought, oh, no.
I mean, I'm almost 70 now, and I'm in the best physical condition I've been in a long time. But it's not muscle; it's just.
So you're just saying you're not Mr. Atlas. If there's a confusion, when in doubt, look at the guy with the hat.
Hey, there you go. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. I've got to ask, if I can, how did you take this photograph?
Oh, this one right here?
Oh, yeah, man. What was the exposure on that? 20, 30 minutes?
Well, this is actually a double exposure.
Okay. Got it.
And that's because, and this was actually taken off the back deck of the log cabin where we used to live in the upstream of headwaters of the Buffalo River area. And the Milky Way, we could never have done this picture with film cameras nor early digital cameras. This is just recent in the last 10 or 12 years, we've had digital technology that would allow us to photograph the Milky Way and the landscape. Right. And this is kind of a late season picture for the Milky Way, and the brightest part of it that we photographers love to photograph now is actually below the horizon here, and we can't see it. But this was a spectacularly clear night when I took this photograph, and there was just a hint of moonlight on the landscape here. And this is fog, ground fog that's building up on the Buffalo River. This is the Buffalo River itself. This was our view we woke up to every morning. After this was the nighttime view. But so the landscape is lit by a little bit of moonlight, but it takes like a couple of minute long exposure to get enough light to show the landscape. Whereas the stars, the Milky Way, it's like a 20-second exposure. So that's why it's a double exposure. Exact same scene, one after another, but you have to do it twice in order to get the exposure correct for both the sky and the landscape. I can't hear you. I see you're talking.
I'm so sorry. I was going to say, if you would do me a favor, I think it's Control or Command plus, and you can blow up this website just a little bit more so everybody can see this a little better, if you don't mind. And I'll say perfect. Yeah, great. Wonderful. I was going to go back into this real quick. There's a couple of things that people don't understand, and I want you to address these issues, if you would. Don't get me wrong. Who was it? Tyler. I think it was Tyler. Vice President Tyler was running for president against Lincoln, and Lincoln used to say he was born in a log cabin, and Tyler said he wasn't born in a log cabin, but he sure wished he had been, so he could have that cred. You know, living in a log cabin may not be what everybody thinks it's cracked up to be. Is it, Tim?
Well, for me, it was. I loved it.
But it's kind of cold and damp and kind of hot and muggy. It's not exactly environmentally stable.
No, it can be whatever you want it to be.
Well, I mean, y'all had HVAC and whatever, right?
Oh, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
In fact, we actually had DSL internet to our cabin before Northwest Arkansas did.
Are you serious?
Before they took it to big cities. Whenever they laid the phone line to, when I built the cabin, had the cabin built in 1997, had a phone installed. It was 1.5 miles to the phone line. So they buried it in the road coming out to what is our cabin. And they put in wire capable of DSL. And so, but Fayetteville didn't have it yet, for instance. And whenever DSL was available in Newton County, overnight we had DSL internet access through the phone line, and Fayetteville didn't.
Unbelievable. And you had at least 3 megs down, right?
Yeah, it was pretty good for that. So no, we didn't. You might remember, or may not, back in 1980, 2000, 2001, a little girl got lost named Haley Zega.
Yeah. And
when I ended up writing a book about it, The Search for Haley, and she was a little 6-year-old that got lost at Hawksbill Crag right after she had been on a hike and just left Hawksbill Crag, became the largest search and rescue mission in Arkansas history. I believe it still is. And she was found on day 3, alive and well. And her family kind of gathered at our log cabin. The search and rescue folks didn't want them out with all of the other searchers and rescue teams, so they kind of put them with us in our log cabin, and we had 50 to 60 people living there for 3 days.
Two or three bedrooms, suppose, I'm assuming.
Yeah, a couple of bedrooms, but we also had 3 phone lines because of our business and personal lines. And back then we had to have a separate telephone line just for the fax machine. Yeah. And so they got to use the fax machine the family did to kind of get to talk to the outside world. So it was very technologically advanced for a log cabin.
Very technological. Probably the most high-tech cabin in the Ozarks at that time.
Well, yeah, at the turn of the century, that was, so it was a turn of the century log cabin, just a different.
Just not the one you were thinking, right?
Right. Yeah.
Well, so the photo you have here, which is magnificent, and I understand putting the 2 photos together, but I'm sorry, let me back up just for a sec. I'm assuming if I go to timernst.com, I can also pick up a book, The Search for Jessica.
Search for Haley.
I'm sorry, excuse me.
Ironically, well, not ironically, but that book is out of print, has been for a long time, but we do have an ebook version of it that you can go to Amazon and just type in The Search for Haley, and the ebook version of it is exactly what the original book was.
Well, scroll up just for a moment, if you would. I saw something, and I apologize I didn't bring that up. The Canvas Gallery will be open Saturday, 11/26. I don't think the show is going to be out in that time, but do you do that on a regular basis or?
Normally we don't. In fact, we're not normally open to the public, but right now we're open every Saturday until Christmas.
I'm about to say, because this would make a great Christmas idea if you want to tell somebody what Arkansas is like.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, and actually, since we're, again, this is our main webpage. And these are all
hop back to the calendar just for a minute, if you would. Hop back to the calendar. I wanted everybody to see that.
Yeah. Interestingly, it's kind of funny that this is on here because this is also a picture off the back deck of our cabin, but this is our new cabin where we live now, which is closer to the Metroplex. And
well, you wouldn't call it downtown, but just closer.
No, that's right. But this is a little side creek, a side drainage of the Little Buffalo River. This is Henson Creek that flows into the Little Buffalo River that we can see a little to the left in this picture, and then it eventually flows in to the Big Buffalo River through the town of Jasper, the Little Buffalo River throat.
And by the way, if you haven't been to Jasper, beautiful little town. It is picturesque rural Arkansas. It really is. Wouldn't you say, Tim?
Absolutely, and they've got some great food there, and
the little cafeteria there on the corner. Yeah,
that's right.
Well, scroll down a little more if you would. Show us, and I'm going to really put you on the spot. What's your favorite part of Arkansas?
Well, the Buffalo River area where I live is, just because this is where I live and I see it every day. And I probably a majority of the photographs that I take from Arkansas are from here, just simply because I love the edges of daylight. Before sunrise, right after sunrise, before sunset, right after sunset, nighttime. And, I love the Ouachita Mountains, but I don't get up and walk out the door and I'm able to see, sunrise in the Ouachita Mountains every day like I do here. So when I go to the Ouachita Mountains, it's a more deliberate thing to where I have to make an effort to go down there, and or where swamps in down the Delta or other places around Arkansas. So it's just easier to photograph where you are.
Sure.
And so that's why I love it here.
Well, and where I was touching with that is that I'm not really a fan of the Delta. It's a really nice place, but I've seen some of your photos of the Delta. They're magnificent.
They are. We've got some incredible swamplands is what I call it. In fact, we have a stretch of almost 500,000 acres of basically swampland that is protected by various government agencies, whether it be the White River National Wildlife Refuge or Arkansas Game and Fish Commission lands. And it's just there's just some fabulous recreational opportunities throughout that area, but also scenic opportunities. The largest living thing in Arkansas is in one of them. It's a giant bald cypress tree, but it's also a great place for waterfowl hunting and other species too.
Where is where's the virgin timber at? Is it way down in Chico County, or is it over by the San Francis?
Well, virgin is kind of a
relative term.
Yeah. It's there's a lot of big swamp trees down there, but they have been logged over, I'm sure, over the centuries. Most of them.
Now we just call it old growth, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. We'll take us on a tour of your books. Are these in any chronological order? Is this any?
No, okay. they are not. And one thing I will say that is kind of written out right here. Up until a year and a half ago, my wife Pam and I, we're not only the publishers and authors, but we also have always been the distributors of all of our books. And up until recently, if you have seen or handled or owned any of our books, guidebooks or picture books or calendars or anything, both my wife and I touched them multiple times before they ever got into your hands, because we would have them printed and we would receive them in our warehouse, and then we would stack them. And then whenever somebody would order, we would open the boxes and take them out, and I would autograph them and send them off to either direct to people or direct to bookstores and outdoor stores and visitor centers and stuff. But a year and a half ago, we turned all that process over to the University of Arkansas Press, which is what kind of what they do. They distribute books for other authors. And so we no longer handle the direct day-to-day sales of these books. And all these books I'm getting ready to show you are available still direct at any of your retailers that normally would carry them, Wash Tie Outfitters in Hot Springs, and I think All Things Arkansas in Hot Springs has them, as well as Wordsworth Books that we were talking about before. But you can also get them online, and you can still order them direct from our distributor. And so just as an example, this is my most recent number 20 picture book, Arkansas Greatest Hits. And this is one that the slide program that I'm doing right now in various cities. And it has pictures that have been published in other picture books of mine. But these are kind of my favorites that I wanted to collect and put into the last book picture book that I'm going to publish. And it was published a couple of years ago.
And you say the last picture book?
The last picture book, that's right. Yeah. For me, 20 is enough. But just as a quick example, and this is the case of any of the books on this webpage, if you click on them,
right,
it will go direct to our distributor site so that you can mail order it if you want to.
45 years of wilderness photography, my friend.
That's right. And it doesn't really include the 5 years of the wildlife photography.
Of the wildlife. Of the
wildlife.
Wild, yeah. With the air quotes.
That's right.
Let me, and because I realize I try and keep reminding myself, we're a couple of Arkansas guys, and we're familiar with the woods, and I realize a lot of people aren't. How do I say this? Arkansas used to be the bear state.
Right.
We were known as the bear state, and then we had to reintroduce bear.
Right.
And the philosophy, and I've shared this a couple of times on our show, and I don't know how many people really got it, but the Game and Fish used to have has a great magazine that they sent out every quarter, fantastic articles, and it was just very informative. One of the things you had to kind of reverse glean from things is about 100 years ago, we decimated nearly everything. The white-tailed deer. I'm sorry?
I said market hunting, it was called.
Yeah. Oh, is that what it was? Well, because I mean, I saw pictures from Newport where they were pulling out thousands of fish a day. And pulling out clamshells or little shells to make the buttons for everybody. There was a huge button business there. We basically wiped out the bear, and it's easy to say, "Wow, well we had the most successful reintroduction of bear," and we did, but that's because we had already wiped them out. And I think Tim, I think you and I know this photo with the 3 cute bears. That's adorable. That is a 1 in a billion shot, Tim, and you know it and I know it. How did you get that shot?
Well, that was actually, and there's a 3rd cub up the tree too.
Really?
This was shot during a period of time where I was working on my Arkansas wildlife picture book. And it would usually take me a year or 2 of taking pictures specifically for a book before I would have enough good quality images that I felt like to publish a book. And so I was in wildlife mode for most of that 2 years, and I would go to places where I would hope to find wildlife. And this is one in particular where there was someone I knew that was complaining to me that the bears kept tearing up his deer feeder. I thought, deer feeder, that's where they automatically throw out corn a couple times a day to attract deer.
And bear are smart. They're smart enough to sit there and wait for it to go brrr.
Bear love corn. That's right. Yeah. So the bears were coming in. It was really a bear feeder. And so it was just a simple matter of setting up a blind with my camera in the vicinity, not right at the feeder, but in the vicinity. And because he had told me he'd photographed on his game cam a dozen or more different bears. So there were a lot of bears using it. So that's how I got this picture. But it took me 2 or 3 days.
Well, the other part, how many, what?
2 or 3 days of
2 or 3 days. The very first part of this story, when you started, the very first thing that went through my mind is, and I am blessed this way too, you must have an incredibly patient spouse. What are you doing today, Tim? Oh, I'm going to take my camera and go out in the woods and sit and wait for bears to come up. And I'll wait for hours at a time sitting on an uncomfortable folding chair so I can take pictures and hope something works out. And I'll be back in a couple of years and we'll maybe make some more money, honey, right? Am I close?
Well, she knew that when I left, not to expect me home anytime soon. And it's kind of funny. I'm going to scroll down here for just a second and show you one of my other picture books. This is Arkansas Nightscapes, which is another book that took me a couple of years, it seemed like, to take enough pictures for it. And a lot of times I would leave and go out and right after dinner, for instance, I would start work at sunset and I would go out, and sometimes I'd be out all night long and not come back till the next morning. But frequently I would come back in at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning because I got what I needed that night, and I would sneak back in. And more than once, she would wake up in the morning or in the middle of the night after I had come in, and she would look over, and I would still have a headlamp that was turned on my head. And I never noticed it because it's actually, we use a very dim light, red light, single. And so she just, and first time, I'm sure it kind of moved her a little bit, and she was wondering what the heck was going on. But, after 40 or 50 times of your husband coming home and crawling in bed with his red headlamp on, you get used to it.
And him telling you he's been photographing wildlife.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. I bet she was happy when you left the indoor wildlife and went to the outdoor wildlife.
Well, that was long before I met her.
Well, good. Yeah. Well, I wanted to go back and just for a moment. One other thing. There's so many subtleties in this that just cannot be explained. That was 2 cubs, and there was a 3rd one in the tree.
That's correct.
That is a 1 in a million thing too, because typically they just had 1 or 2 cubs. I
used to think so.
Really?
But that's not really the case. They're in fact, the 2 years that we were working on that I was working on this book, we saw not 1 but 4 sets of triplets.
Really?
And different ones. And 2 of them we were sitting on the back deck of our log cabin, and there's a small meadow down below it. And literally Mama would come walking through the meadow, and there were 3 cubs, and they would just kind of feed around, and then they would eventually kind of graze on off back into the woods. And over the course of the summertime, that happened twice. And it was two different sets of bears because the cubs frequently are different colors. There's I've seen like three different colors of bears in Arkansas. There's the very coal black. Sometimes it's so black it's blue.
Yeah.
And then there's what we call a cinnamon color, which is kind of this. That's kind of what this middle one is right here. Almost looks like a grizzly bear, brown bear type. And then there's some that are what we call a blonde phase or blondies, and they're really light. But they're all black bears. It's the only species we have in Arkansas, and that's the way they are for life. So that's how we knew they were different sets of bears. And we also saw one that had 4 cubs. I didn't get any pictures of it, but yeah.
Well,
so
let me go in just a little deeper here. Is this the Cossatot in the middle?
No, this one right here is actually Kings River up here in Kings River Falls. And it's kind of funny. You know, every picture that of mine that published, it seems like there's a story that goes along with it, which if you ever come to one of my slide programs, that can be a very long, drawn out process because I don't mean to jump away, but I'm going to jump away for just a second.
Sure, no problem at all. No problem at all.
Here's all the pictures that are in my newest picture book.
Oh, man.
And there is I forgot what I was talking about. But
no, you were talking about a story behind every picture.
Yeah, the picture of this young lady in the whoops, I'm sorry.
No problem.
This was a setup shot. I had been to this waterfall several times, and I was working on this hiking trail guidebook, and I went to it. It was a very early day in April. The springtime was just coming out, but it was pretty chilly. It was early morning, and I was taking pictures of this, and I thought, oh man, I need a person in it. I don't normally have people in my pictures.
And tell the nice people why. For scale, right?
For scale, yes, helps quite a bit. And sometimes, basically helps sell the book. And and like this one, the Day Hikes guidebook that my wife, Pam, and her young daughter, Amber, who was only 7, I think, when this picture was taken, they're the ones that wrote this book.
Really?
And actually, Amber, a story about this, just yesterday, she's almost 30 now, and she and her boyfriend left before sunrise. I don't know where she got that from.
No idea.
Hiked to the bottom of the Grand Canyon yesterday morning, and then hiked back out again. 20-mile trip.
Wasn't it a little chilly to the bottom?
It was 11 degrees when they started yesterday morning. And they got to the Colorado River at the bottom, and then it was back up to like 30 when they got back out.
Oh, balmy by the time they got back.
Exactly.
To daylight.
Yes, that's right. But I had recently met this girl who's a cousin of a friend of mine, and I was single back then, and she was actually a freeze model part-time at the mall, which that's part of what she did was, she was in, got dressed up in whatever clothes and stood in the window at the mall. And when you walked by, I think that's a whole art form now, but back then. Yeah. And so I drove back home, called her and said, is there any way you could come out and take a picture? I mean, I had literally only met her for a few minutes through this guy. And she said, sure. And so we met and went out there. And the reason that she works for that she works very well for this picture was a multi-second exposure to get the water blurred. And I wanted a person in it, and it needed to be somebody who could hold very still.
Very, very still.
Yes. Freeze model worked perfect.
And the one to the left, I'm assuming is Mather Falls, but I could be wrong.
This is actually over in Heber Springs. This is people call it different things, but it's in the Bridal Veil Falls complex over at Heber Springs.
Right, kind of a triplex, yeah.
Yeah, I started putting people in pictures for scale in 2002 when I came out with the Arkansas Waterfalls Guidebook, which is far and away our biggest selling book of any kind. And to me, it just seemed it was very easy. I mean, just made the picture of the waterfall much more valuable if you had a person in it. And so almost all the pictures in this guidebook, which there's there's a couple of hundred different waterfalls in it now. Excuse me, have a person in it. Most of them are me because I was alone most of the time when I did these. And in the early days, I only had 10 seconds to trip the shutter of the camera and run, get into the picture and pose.
How
And
long
a
were the
lot of
exposures?
times-
2 or 3 seconds?
Yes, yes. So I was kind of a freeze model too, but in this case, it didn't matter if my face was blurred a little bit. It was just because I'm very small. It's just for the scale. But a lot of times I would get there and go back and look at the camera, see what it had taken, because this was all digital, and I wasn't in the picture. I fell before that, or I didn't get there fast enough, or whatever. So, yes, that's. However, now that I'm older and wiser, I don't do this when I document waterfalls anymore. I don't do the scale thing because I feel like people have seen my short green shorts that I used to wear. That's in about 150 of these pictures. They've seen enough of my legs. So.
Wow. Okay. And I know this is like picking children or a Sophie's Choice. Your favorite book, your favorite time.
Well, Arkansas Waterfalls is clearly my favorite book, and I think has had the most impact on people, just simply because, and I've always loved waterfalls. I've always known about waterfalls in Arkansas, but I had no clue that we had the waterfalls that we have in Arkansas. And this has got 200 named waterfalls in it with maps and directions and stuff like that. But there are literally thousands of waterfalls in Arkansas. And
well, let's give everybody from the outside, Hot Springs Village Inside Out, let's give them the outside view. You typically want to go in the spring, right?
Actually, no, right now is kind of the beginning of waterfalls, the best waterfall season. Once the leaves go dormant and they're not on trees and plants and they're not sucking up water from groundwater, all the rain that falls will mostly run off. And that's when the waterfalls are running the best. All through the winter on into early spring is typically when we think waterfalls are great, because that's usually when people get out and go floating.
Right.
Back to what I was talking about of the Buffalo River and Arkansas in general, especially in the Ouachitas around Hot Springs, is that springtime is great to be here, but waterfalls run all year. Run all winter long once they get fully recharged and flowing. Towards the summertime, then they start to dry up, and unless we have big rainfalls in the summer, the waterfalls compete with all the vegetation soaking it up. So by early summer, a lot of the really big waterfalls are much lower than they typically are. Now we're coming off a drought right now, so we're not quite at full power on our waterfalls yet. Probably in the next several weeks we'll get going really well.
Going to take a little longer to recharge everything, right?
Yes.
Well, and I want to ask, this Thursday supposed to get a good rain. Thanksgiving supposed to get a good rain. So probably Friday, Saturday, Sunday would be a better time to go see them, or
yes, after Thanksgiving, and almost all of the waterfalls in Arkansas are weather dependent.
Mm-hmm.
And even springs, they'll run for quite a while after waterfalls that are fed by springs will run much longer than those that aren't. But usually the larger the drainage is, the longer waterfalls will run. So it just kind of depends on what the local area is. There's a really neat hiking trail just outside of Hot Springs Village at Lake Catherine State Park that's got a short, easy trail that goes to a waterfall, and I think it's Falls Creek Falls. And there's you can go any direction from Hot Springs and see some waterfalls.
I wanted to mention also, when we've talked about the lakes here in Hot Springs, and I think from an outside view, it's hard to see really the layers of protection. Just over my shoulder is 1.7 million acres of national forest that runs roughly from 20 miles west of Little Rock to 65 miles into Oklahoma. Well, it's this huge band, and you think, number one, it's a monolith, and it is not. There are private areas inside there. But like, for example, Lake Ouachita. Well, Lake Ouachita is 40,000 acres, and it has a buffer all the way around it that's run by the Corps of Engineers, so you can't build right on that lake. All the governmental agencies, which I think most people just think governmental agencies are I'm sorry, the term comes to buffoons is what most people think, but they know what they're doing for the most part, and they work together in an incredibly seamless way, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Yes, and Lake Ouachita is a shining example of one of Arkansas's most beautiful states and most beautiful lakes. And of course, I love all the islands in it.
Oh, nearly 200.
Yeah, it's great. But there's a lot of opportunities, of course, for boating, but also for hiking with the hiking trails at Lake Ouachita State Park and the Lovett Trail now that is along I guess the southern part of Lake Ouachita, and then of course the Ouachita National Recreation Trail, which is the longest hiking trail in Arkansas, starts in Oklahoma at the end, the western end of the Ouachita National Forest, and goes all the way to Pinnacle Mountain, just outside of Little Rock. But I also, I've always wanted to live on the water, and I would love to have a house in Hot Springs Village or in Hot Springs on one of the lakes down there. And yeah, exactly. So, I have some cousins, two different cousins of mine who both of them asked me, they're wanting a winter home. And one of them lived on an island in Florida, and they just loved it there. But they wanted to be closer to their original home in Minnesota, and they were looking at Arkansas. They always used to make fun of me because I was a hillbilly, truly, whenever I would come up to visit them in Minnesota every summer. And they wanted to know, they've seen these lists of places to live in Arkansas. And they said, where would you live? And I said, Hot Springs Village.
Did you really, Tim? I didn't know that.
Absolutely. And you guys have two new resident families in Hot Springs Village, just that are cousins of mine, and I'm proud to say they're cousins. Yeah, they may not be proud of this hillbilly here, but at any rate, yeah. So
when you went to Minnesota, did they think you talked funny?
Absolutely, and I knew they did.
Well, I mean, obviously they did. I mean, there's without any question there. But yeah.
Before we get away from it, I want to show you, I want to answer the second half of your question. I love all the picture books, all 20 of them, and the pictures in them are all favorites of mine. But this one is probably my most favorite picture book. And it's one of only 2 out of the 20 that I've done where there are pictures that are not from Arkansas. Of course, you cut me open, I'll bleed Arkansas. That's who I am first and foremost. Yeah. But I've spent a lot of the last 45 years taking pictures elsewhere. And there's a chapter in this book about Colorado, and one on Iceland, and one on Yellowstone in the wintertime and stuff like that. So it's my most favorite picture book.
And let's come back to that just for a minute. The Arkansas nightscapes and the quality of light. Number one, I know there's a lot involved to do what you're doing there with that, but what a lot of people don't understand is the golden hour in the morning and the evening. The sun is crossing through the atmosphere. There's more atmosphere for it to cross through as strikes the atmosphere, and you get this just golden Mediterranean type look, right?
Yeah, sometimes more than others. It can vary quite a bit, and I mentioned earlier that I love photographing at the edges of daylight. Mm-hmm. And sunset's a perfect example. Most people go out and they want to see the sunset, they photograph the sunset, and they pack up and leave. After they leave, that's when I like to show up. And because that's when sometimes 30 minutes, even an hour after sunset, layers of clouds way up in the sky, eventually the sun hits them and light up. And it's just, really, this picture of Mount Hood in Oregon, I was standing chest deep in a lake.
Really?
When I took this picture, and was being almost eaten alive by mosquitoes. In fact, while I was waiting for this scene to happen, for the sun to go down and the sky to light up, I literally was sunk, because I didn't have any insect repellent, and I sunk down with my nose stuck up kind of out of the water to keep the mosquitoes from biting, because they were ferocious. And then I would rise up out of the water, and then it would ripple across this lake. So I had to stand there perfectly still without moving. My camera's on a tripod just right above the water, and kind of wait for this to happen. But this was probably 25, 30 minutes after sunset.
Well, a lot of people call that the second sunset.
There you go.
And in the long summer that we love the long summer here. And a couple of things other people for the outside that you don't know, some of the things that are implied here. you know, 1.8 million acres, 1.78 million acres right here behind us. Well, of that, 250,000 of that is absolute wilderness, no roads, no motor cars, not a single luxury kind of thing, right?
That's correct.
That pristine darkness is the only way you get these shots. Now, you can overexpose and whatever, but you say, well, why don't I see the Milky Way at my house? You live in a town, you live in a city, right?
That's true. Milky Way does take dark skies. And by the way, the Buffalo River up here where we live is an international dark sky park now.
Oh, really?
Yes. And yeah, I mean, there are places in Ouachita that are just as dark.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and I was also going to note we'll have the sun go down, and just you say, well, the sun goes down, and I have people that'll come out and go, oh, it's a beautiful day. This is going to make a great sunset, not a cloud in the sky, and I'm like, no, you're going to want clouds for a great sunset.
That's right. That's by the way, speaking of Hot Springs Village and dark sky, just 2 weeks ago, I was sitting on my cousins with the new house, just moved there last year on their back deck, and we could see there was not a view of the Milky Way, but we could see stars like Cassiopeia was one of the main constellations, and it was shining bright. So Hot Springs Village is it's got some good nighttime sky viewing. I'm sorry.
And I want to just a techno note to throw in there real quick. And I'm assuming you're an Apple guy. The Google Sky View, and I'm sure Apple has a similar product too, but if you've never loaded the Sky View, it is remarkable. It's basically an app you can put on your phone. It overlays over your camera where the stars are. So you turn on your camera at night, point it up at the sky, and it'll say, okay, here's the North Star, here's, whatever. And as you spin around, you can literally look beneath you and see what the Southern Hemisphere is seeing at the same time.
Right.
Fascinating product. Tell me more. You had, scroll down just a little further, if you would. Where's the photo you had? And if you just want to have any you want to highlight, I'm thinking about the photo that you have of the fox getting a drink by the water. That is one of the most beautiful pictures, and I want to hear the story about that, if you would.
Well, and that will, okay.
That was a healthy little red fox, by the way.
Yes, it was. I'm going to take you back to, so this is my main web page,
mm-hmm.
And you can order all the books by scrolling down just like we did a second ago, or get them from your local store.
Mm-hmm.
But right up here, there's a link to online photo galleries.
Okay.
And if you click on that, that takes you to a different website that has literally thousands of pictures of mine. And one of the things that it has is all of my recent picture books. And if you click on one, like Arkansas Wildlife,
right,
all the pictures that are inside that book will come up.
Oh, wow.
And so this kind of gives you a preview of it.
Oh, my
and
goodness.
While this book is no longer in print, but there may still be some bookstores that have it. But
sure.
I'm scrolling down here to see if I can find the one. There's a red fox, and there's okay, I didn't get that picture in this book,
mm-hmm.
but there is but this just gives you an idea of, you can go look at lots of different pictures and see what they are inside the book.
Well, I want to mention the two that I seem most iconic that I've seen of yours is the picture of the elk looking down on it's a higher shot looking down on Boxley Valley with the elk. That is just, oh my goodness, time just stands still, it seems to, at that time.
Looking down on the elk?
Yeah, I thought you did, or maybe across. In my mind, you know how you can't remember things like that.
Oh yeah, I know. I've taken lots of elk pictures. This is the most popular elk picture of mine.
Really?
Yeah.
And they were reintroduced in the late 90s?
Something like that, yes. And
have frankly flourished.
A tremendous success. This is the one that you're asking about.
That's the one. That's the one. Well, you actually have one where he's dipping down, taking a drink of water, and oh my goodness, that's what how long did this take to shoot this picture?
Well, this is another situation where when I was working on, and that other picture was taken at the same time. And I knew someone in another county here that had some acreage, and they knew I was taking pictures of wildlife, and they said, hey, we got some foxes over here that have kits or pups, whatever they're called.
Mm-hmm.
And we see them almost every day playing around, and because their den is not too far away. So I went over there, set up my blind, and again, I spent it was 2 or 3 days on that one too. And this is one of the things that he said they did every day is, they came down to the little pond and got a drink. So that's where I hung out. And with wildlife, the guys that are full-time real wildlife photographers, to me, that's the most difficult nature photography there is, because you can take thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures and never get one of moving animals that is perfect or that is really good. So you have to, because you got to get the eyes in focus, and you got to get not only great light, which is what I love, but you have to get the expression of the animal. And wildlife, of course, they're usually moving around.
Absolutely. And I tell you what's amazing to me, I see what you've got going on here, and this is absolutely stunning. You see, you sit for 2 or 3 days to get a good photo, right?
Sometimes,
what happens if after two?
Wildlife.
Well, I was going to say, well, have you sat someplace 2 or 3 days and got nothing?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Most of the time.
Lord. Oh,
yes.
My Lord. My
well,
Lord.
and there's a lot of times, just last month, and this is not wildlife, but I left here in the dark, driving over to where I used to live, Hawksbill Craig, and hiked down there in the dark, kind of as it was getting light. It rained all night, and it was the peak of fall color. And I had wanted to get a fall color picture of Hawksbill Craig, which I'd been there photographing literally hundreds of times. And this was the picture that I wanted to get another version of. And this is one that I took a number of years ago, but it seemed like conditions were going to be good for this kind of a picture, because at about just after daylight, the clouds were going to start breaking up and moving back and forth. And that's what was happening when I took this picture. But I stood there for 3 hours, and the clouds started to break up just a little bit, but they never did this. I call these God beams, and the God beams never happened that day. But
that's fantastic. That is fantastic.
Hung around a while, and I didn't get a picture of Hawksbill Craig, but I did get this picture. And this was on the trail to Hawksbill Craig, and this was in between the raindrops. And this is a picture that I've taken many times, but I've been back there many times to photograph it, but I never got it quite like this. So
curly willow?
It's actually a high bush huckleberry bush or tree. It's woody plant, I guess.
Yeah.
And this is like 6 feet tall. But they used to call it farkleberry bush is another name.
Yeah, I've heard the term. Yeah.
So this is the case where I went there to take one picture, gave up after 3 hours, and found this one on the way back. And this one, since I took this picture, is our best-selling print.
Really?
At our slide programs, because it,
you, my friend, are one patient person.
Well, sometimes I am, but not in history class. I wasn't patient at all.
So let's just put it this way: you didn't start out as a patient person, right?
No, I did not.
Do me a favor. Sorry.
I was going to say, even because I grew up hunting, and even at 7 years old, I used to go to deer camp with my dad and brothers, and back then, I spent a lot of time. I would literally get up in the morning and with my rifle that I could hardly lift. It was so heavy. It was just a big old World War II rifle, 8mm Mauser rifle, and I would just head out in the woods, and I would drag that gun around all day. I didn't have the patience to sit and wait for a deer, that's the way that you're supposed to do it. And I never did that. But as I got older and older, I walked farther and farther and farther. And because of that, in the latter days of when I used to deer hunt, I would hike 15, 20 miles a day. And fast forward a few years, I became a lover of hiking and backpacking. And in 1981, whenever the Forest Service was building the Ozark Highlands Trail in bits and pieces, but they quit doing it because they lost funding for it, and it was just going to grow up and go away, and nobody knew about it at that time.
Right.
The first place that I went after I was working with them, and they said, yes, you can go ahead and if you can get a group of people together to do the volunteer construction of this trail, we'll let you do it. And one of the places we built the trail was where I used to deer hunt. And part of the trail now goes along an old trestle from the turn of the other century, the 1900s. And I used to deer hunt on my long hikes. I would make it over to that area. So kind of coming full circle from my early years of deer hunting with no patience.
I'm tickled because in our society, and look, I'm happy we have technology. I get to meet you. We get to email. This is wonderful. But I think that the joy of hiking, I'm hoping it's making a resurgence, because there's something about having life happen at roughly 2.5 miles an hour. You know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
When Diane and I turn a corner in the national forest and there's a mama bear and two cubs, and the mama bear won't run away like she's prone to do. And I'm like, why isn't she going anywhere? And then two cubs burst out of the woods going, "We're coming, mama, we're coming, we're coming." You you can't fast forward your DVR to that point in life.
No, got to be there.
Got to be there. And it takes time to get there, and it takes time to get back. And yeah, do me a favor here. And Tim, 2 questions. Number 1, would you possibly please come back sometime?
Oh, sure. My time's cheap. I can talk for a long time.
Well, I'll tell you what, if you'll come back, we'll promote your books again. How about that?
Sounds good.
And calendars. Number 2, if you would, right dead in the middle of the picture, you have a picture of a flower.
Uh-huh.
Would you double click on that just for a sec?
This one?
Yes, sir, right there.
Okay.
Tell me the story. I want to hear that story.
Well, this is just, one of the things that I've always done with my camera is try to get closer to things and try to come up with a viewpoint that is not normal. I spent a lot of time crawling around the woods on my belly, photographing little tiny mushrooms and acorns and things like that, and looking up, getting a worm's eye view. Yeah. And while I have a lot of pictures of coneflowers and fields of coneflowers, this one really attracted me because of the way these guys are. And I don't know the scientific name for all these things or even the common name for what these are. But I just wanted to get really, really close and just kind of move in literally as close as I could. And the very first print that I ever made of this, in our gallery here, we mostly sell canvas prints, gallery wrapped canvas prints. Right. And I've been doing so for a long time. And the first one of these I made was like 3 by 4 feet. And it was just an astounding, number one, that the technology would allow me to print that large.
With that kind of resolution.
With that kind of resolution. The detail in all these is really just amazing. And I have made other prints up to 12 feet wide on canvas of flowers. And it's just astonishing what what people don't understand is that this was a tripod shot, I'm assuming. Of course, yes. Pretty much everything I do is on a tripod.
And the reason it was a tripod shot, you say, well, I can just stand up and take this picture. No, you can't, because the depth, the amount of resolution, the depth of field, the everything requires that you stand here a few seconds, right?
Yes. Yep. Absolutely. Well, yeah. In a picture like this, I probably took 50 or 60 pictures of it.
Really?
Yeah. I'm an old film shooter, and the first 1 or 2 million pictures that I took were on film, and you never knew if you got it good, that it worked out until, sometimes weeks later when you get the film processed.
Well, didn't you just bracket everything a third under, a third over?
Well, no, I bracket differently, but a lot of times I will bracket the exposure, but I also bracket the focus and use different lenses and try to get it. I mean, I'm sure I shot this from 4 or 5 different angles, from a side to where, these things just kind of poking up, and I'm sure I probably crawled around and photographed it from behind too.
Well, I'm amazed at the simplicity and the beauty of God's creation, simply in something so simple as a purple coneflower. And by the way, butterflies are nuts about these things. They think they're fantastic and they're gorgeous in the field.
Oh, I know it. Yeah.
Wow. Yeah,
well, I've got pictures of butterflies on them too.
Show me. And we'll talk about, while you're digging that up real quick, I'll mention oh, wow. Well, there's a beautiful monarch on there, right?
Correct. That's not the same coneflower. That was a different year, probably different camera system.
And these, for the most time, these are just volunteers that blow up in the middle of the, you have disturbed soil, you got poke, and you got coneflower.
Well, that's true. Although kind of like wildlife, I like to stack the deck when I go out to take pictures of things. And there's a picture here that is also of coneflowers. To see if I can find it. That we have a lot of places in Arkansas that are just fabulous original prairie land.
Oh, wow.
This
Where's
is one
this?
of them.
Where's
And
this?
this is just north of Charleston. This is the Flanagan Prairie, one of two prairies near Charleston. The other one is called Cherokee Prairie, and it doesn't do this every year, but it and these are pale purple coneflowers, where the other is just plain purple coneflower. This is echinacea here.
Yeah.
But this is a scene that I envisioned in my head the day before. I saw somebody had taken a picture and posted on Facebook of these flowers and of this prairie, which, by the way, Dale Bumpers and his wife Betty were from Charleston, and I'm pretty sure this is correct. This is called Flanagan Prairie because her family donated the land.
And this is U.S. State or U.S. Senator Bumpers.
Yeah, right. Governor and Senator.
Governor and Senator, yeah.
And during his administration, he developed and purchased and created these Arkansas natural areas that are kind of smaller versions of the wilderness, the national wilderness areas that you were talking about before. And part of what many of the national areas are original prairie like this.
Two things in this one, if I can. Number one, the moonshot, was that superimposed or was it there?
It is a multiple exposure picture, but it was there.
Okay.
And the multiple exposure part was twofold. Number one, this was shot with a short telephoto lens, and that's why the moon is as large as it is.
Right.
But I could not get all of the all the flowers in focus. Let me do that again. If I had shot this with a telephoto lens, I could have gotten, some of these in front in focus, but the moon would have been out of focus. So thanks to digital, this is actually 7 or 8 pictures. And
let's talk about, I'm sorry, excuse me, 7 or 8 pictures?
7 or 8 pictures. And it's the exact same scene, but I focused on the flowers in front, took a picture, and then I focused a little further back, and then a little further back, and a little further back, a little further back. And then I focused on the moon. My eye, saw everything in focus.
Right.
But the telephoto lens on a camera can't capture all this in focus in one picture. So this is called focus stacking, and took 7 or 8 pictures in all the same exposure. And, the wind wasn't blowing, thank goodness.
Right. Yeah. Oh, yeah. You would have had blurs all over, wouldn't you?
Right. And then you put it in the computer, and with 2 clicks, it looks like this. And so people ask me, do you use Photoshop? And yes, when you shoot digitally, you have to use Photoshop. But I also try to make things like what I saw them. And in this case, I could not have captured it with the camera.
As I've said many times, sometimes it doesn't fit on film or CCDs or whatever. And I want to bring up something here real quick, just because I know there's a depth across here. This is echinacea. And what exactly do we use echinacea for?
Well, it's a very healthy plant, and I'm sure there's a long list of things that it's used for.
It's an antidepressant. It's a antibacterial. This was the natives' go-to plant. And you're thinking, well, it's a pretty coneflower. I'm like, it's a lot more than a coneflower. This was the drugstore for these people. Exactly.
Something else along that same line is, waterfalls. It turns out they produce, I think it's negative ions.
Oh, they do.
Negative ions, help. What is it? They stimulate endorphins in us.
They stimulate endorphins, but it actually strips off some of the oxygen. So when you're near a waterfall like this, you're getting a higher content of oxygen, less CO2. Oh my Lord, I hadn't thought about that before. But I've stood at the bottom of Mather Falls more than once and thought, it feels different here. It smells different here,
That's right. Absolutely. And that's why. And so it literally is, it's healthy mentally and physically, because it takes a lot of effort to get some of these waterfalls, and mentally because of it just makes you a happier, calmer person.
Well, we joke that Mather Falls, which is at Petit Jean, one of my favorite places, but if I'm not mistaken, I think these are pretty exact numbers, Tim. I think it's about 1.25 miles down to Mather Falls, and it's
Something
3.5 back. I'm pretty sure it's about 3.5 back, because the 3.5 back is like, yeah. Oh, there we go. Oh man.
I'm sure running short on time. This picture
No,
was taken after this picture was taken after sunset. And
after sunset?
after sunset, the sun had gone down. I'd packed up and left. I didn't get a good picture. I was walking out. And as I was leaving, the setting sun, or the upper layers of the clouds up above started to light up.
Diffused
and they
light.
created a beautiful glow, colored glow on this scene. So I ran back up here, got my camera out, and I didn't want to get the view that I could see was going to be from the middle of the creek here.
Right.
And so I was going to have to wade out into the middle of the creek. And this was almost at flood stage. It was a lot of water.
Wow.
I didn't want to get my blue jeans wet because I was on a 2 or 3 day road trip. And like I do frequently, I wear the same clothes, and I didn't want to get my blue jeans wet. So I looked around, everybody had left. I pulled my britches off, took my boots off, set them up there carefully, and I waded out into this water until I got to, my voice started getting high, and it was pretty deep water. So I set my tripod up in kind of like it did for that one lake picture of Mount Hood, to where it was above the water, set my camera on it. I mean, the tripod legs were in the water, and I took 3 or 4 pictures, very long exposure. As you can see, the foam on the water here this is like a minute long exposure.
Really?
And during that time, this foam traveled, and it went both sides of me. So you can tell I'm in the middle of the water.
Yeah.
Well, then the color started to go away. I only got, like I said, 3 or 4 pictures, and it was great. I got the picture, and then it opened up and it started pouring rain.
Oh, and you're standing in the middle of the creek.
I'm standing in the middle of it with my clothes over there getting wet anyway.
That you didn't want to get wet. Yeah.
But I didn't want to get wet. So don't tell the Park Service that.
They'll never know. They'll never know. Story's safe with me, us and 3 or 4 thousand other people. I do want to mention real quick a couple of things. I'm going to make a suggestion, and I hope you'll endorse me on this. A lot of people don't want to carry a big tripod. They don't want to carry 5 pounds of equipment or whatever. There are some really great point and shoots that people would be happy with, that have some really good zoom. I would recommend a point and shoot and a monopod. Is that a good idea?
Oh yeah, that's a great idea. Although, this is one of the best cameras ever made.
It's hard to beat. It's hard to beat. And let's discuss it. We're in the middle of it. Let's go there. The CCD on those little cameras is about 3/16 to 1/4 of an inch.
It's tiny.
The CCD on one of your cameras is about 1.67 inches. It's big. It's a big CCD. And that's the delineation. People are like, well, why would I spend $500 on a nice camera when I could get one for $150? It's the size of that film, to use the term, the CCD. And that's where all the resolution comes from, right, Tim?
That's right. So, and interestingly, with the tiny sensor on an iPhone, you can take pictures that I can't do with a large format, medium format, $10,000 camera. And you can also get greater depth of focus with this little camera. Because the lenses are extreme wide angle lenses, greater depth of field.
Very much.
But you cannot enlarge these very big, and that goes into the resolution that you're talking about. So while this picture right behind me, Hawksbill Craig, that's 5 feet wide. I was taken with a medium format digital camera that actually has a 2 1/4 inch wide sensor.
Really?
I can take a picture with this iPhone that I can project that large, or even on a big screen, but making a print that large where you can walk up and see the detail. And that's in the individual leaves and rocks and grains of sand and stuff. You can't do that with a phone.
Yeah,
not yet anyway.
Well, the resolution, and I tell people, we've done this from some of the classes I teach. There's just 2 or 3 rules of taking a photograph with an iPhone or a camera or phone. Number 1, clean your lens because it's typically smudged. Number 2, move your butt. Get out in the middle of the creek if you need to get your picture, if that's what you want to do. Well, I'll just pinch and zoom. Well, when you pinch and zoom, this 1/4 of an inch CCD now had an 1/8 or a 1/16. It just uses a smaller portion. That's why they get so grainy. I'm not trying to get super techie, but move your butt. Move your butt. Find the angle that you want to take. And by the way, I have walked up. I had my pants on, but I have walked up that path from Mather up back to the lodge in the dark, and it's not a lot of fun.
Well, now see, to me, I love it. I love going uphill. And,
in the dark?
Yes.
On slippery, when it's raining, on slippery rocks?
I'm very comfortable in rain and in the dark. And I will frequently, because I'm almost always by myself, wear a bike helmet with me, because if
Really?
you're on slippery rocks, even
Yep.
on the level in the middle of the day, you can slip and hit your head, and then that may
Story
be it.
over. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I'm much more careful in the dark and when it's slippery and whatnot. In fact, these days I also wear the brand name of what I wear are Yak Tracks, which is kind of expandable things that you put on the soles of your boots if I'm going to be crossing streams or going onto wet, slippery rocks, particularly if I'm taking pictures of waterfalls, and they do great. They're designed for ice and snow, but they work great on slippery rocks, and they don't weigh very much. So
I've seen those and heard of them. I didn't realize that that is a great idea for you're going to be. And when you're going to do a waterfall, you will be in the water. You will be on wet rocks, wet, slippery rocks.
a lot of times that's where the best view is from. That's for sure.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I tell you what, we're going to have to wrap it up. I appreciate you. And man, I thank you so much, Tim. We'll get this packed up and sent to you and let you see a copy. For Hot Springs Village Inside Out, I'm Dennis Simpson. He's Tim Ernst, the all-weather photographer man. And we will talk to you next time. Thanks, Tim.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate being here.
Thanks for watching and listening to Hot Springs Village Inside Out, a weekly podcast starring Hot Springs Village, Arkansas. Visit the website at hotspringsvillageinsideout.com.